Okay, so welcome to our free Write Your Book webinar. Really excited to just even be launching this program with my friend and colleague, Shantae. I'm Justine Gonzalez. For me, this program is an answer to a dream, meaning I'm going to be like a guinea pig, and Dr. Barnes will be taking me through her process. I have been published numerous times, have written some books as well, but never a children's book. So this whole webinar, though, is if you've had an idea or you've ever thought, I'd love to write some type of book, and you're also a K-12 educator, we wanted to put out there what it takes. And consequently, Dr. Barnes also has a publishing company. So she is very well versed on what does it really take to publish a book in today's world. Am I missing anything else before we dive in, Shantae?
No, I think that's a great intro. I say, let's get to it. So we're going to set the mindset of this space right now, and I'm going to let Justine do that, and then we'll introduce ourselves and then get rocking and rolling.
Yes. So one of the things that we will be talking candidly about, not only in this webinar, but when our program launches in August, is the mindset pieces of this. One of the things I found walking into of authorship is, lots of wounds come up for you. You start to want to put out art. And if you are a creative or an artist or an author already, you really have to dig into who you are. And it can get, welcome. It can get really difficult once you start really taking those risks as an author and wanting to put your creative thought out there. And what came up for me a lot was what a lot of people have heard called imposter syndrome. And I would constantly question, is this really good? Should I really be putting this in the world? So one of the things I want to encourage us all to be grounded in is, yes, you're here for a reason. You're here on purpose. And if you're in K-12 education right now, my God, thank you. Thank you. That's what it is. And so because that has historically been both mine and Shantae's entire experiences professionally, of course, we're serial entrepreneurs too and dabble in a lot of hobbies, but through and through, we are both actually like reading teachers. And I know you have a heavy library background on top of that, as far as understanding multilingual learners, so many things. But mindset wise, I want us to take 30 seconds. If you're driving, obviously don't close your eyes. If you want to close your eyes and you're in a space to do so, but we're just going to give like 30 seconds to think about if you could write your dream book and what would it accomplish? What would it do? And try to envision a world where that happens and what you're doing, how it looks, how it feels, why it's important to you. And the biggest thing you're going to have to shut off is then those other narratives of like, oh, well, that's not possible, or I'm too tired, or nobody will listen to what I have to say. Like, so don't even entertain any of the negative thoughts, but just think. Some people call it pie in the sky. I call it that should be your goal, right? When you look at something you want. So take the next 30 seconds and just envision if you could write the perfect book for yourself and to share with the world. What are your ideas with that? And how does that look and feel? Maybe you're a person who wants to eventually become a full-time author. I don't know. Is your book online for kids to read? I love doing exercises like that too, because at the same point, I think it's like very empowering, Shantae, but it's also scary because I myself was just envisioning how I will want my own children's book to look after this learning experience in the next year. And I immediately started going, oh, well, who will buy that? So, so I put that out there because the journey of authorship is so much more than coming up with your initial idea. It is being willing to commit enough to yourself to see that idea through. So why don't I hand it back to you, Shantae? I'll very briefly introduce myself, but then hand it off to you, Justine Gonzalez. I'll be co-facilitating our Write Your Book program starting in August with Shantae. I run and operate a consulting firm called Educator Aid Incorporated, previous teacher, principal, superintendent, done a lot of the things, and now I get to work with K-12 schools across the country, as well as do some authorship work and things of that nature. So I will pass it off to my colleague and friend, Shantae.
Well, thank you all for being here this evening, because I know there's so many things that's pulling out our attention. And I just thank you all for taking the time to do something for you, because many times as educators, our lives is centered around doing everything for everyone else. And so for you to stop and say, hey, this is something I want to do for myself, I really, really appreciate that. And I know how hard that is. Myself, I also have a consulting business, Blazing Brilliance, where I work with different schools, whether it's in Indiana or different universities. I also founded Brave Brother Books with my husband. You will see down there on our logo, that logo was based on our identical twin sons. So his name, they actually picked the name of our company. So that's why they're on the logo. And when we think about Brave, we're just thinking about people kind of when you write a book, you're putting yourself out there, even if the book's not about yourself. And so when I asked my boys, like, why do you choose that name? They said it's kind of scary to write and publish yourself. And I'm like, that's really cool. So as you guys know, children say things that just blow our minds all the time. I'm also the editor-in-chief of Indie Kids Winnie. We just rebranded ourselves in March. We've been around since 2016. And we do a lot of writing just about education in Indiana. And then I've written for many other places, which I won't go into at this moment. But rest assured, this is what we love. This is what we do. And writing is our thing. So let's get into it. The very first thing you need to know is what your why is. Like, why are you writing a book? And education is like, oh, here we go with that. What's your why? But it's really important because there's so many reasons why we want to write a book. I've talked to so many authors. So some people say, like, I want to leave whatever job I have and I want to become an author. So their why is to write books in a way that they can replace their income and live off that income. So that's one lane of publishing a book. The other lane could be, especially with educators, well, for me, part of the reason I started this company, I was an English teacher for over a decade, literacy coach, co-led a middle school. And a lot of times the stories I wanted, they didn't have all the things that I felt like the students needed. And so I wanted to stop writing. I would write a lot of pieces about we diversify the curriculum, all that type of stuff. But at some point you have to stop talking about the problem. You have to start doing something about the problem. So for me, when I thought about books, it's like, how can I fill that gap of what teachers need in their classrooms? So some people just want to write a book so their students can read books that they've written, because we know what the standards are. And sometimes you have a book that we really love and it's like, oh, that really didn't hit all the standards I wanted to hit. So, and not that everything's about standards, as we know, but there are certain things that, time is so limited. The other thing, it could be, well, I want to have a book as a platform to maybe get speaking jobs or to be able to present more, because I tell people your book is kind of like a business card. So if you go speak somewhere, then you can also sell your book. Or your book shows people before they even meet you, oh, they have a book of expertise, because what Justine and I realized that we're going to have two types of tracks in this program. We're going to have the people that want to write children books for children, and then we're going to have professionals that says, I am really good at teaching literacy, and I have some ideas that I want to say about it, or strategies I've used in the classroom, being in the urban setting, or how to build relationships with kids. And I want to package that somehow so I can use that and share that. And then I can go out and do speaking gigs or do professional development. And then I can also give people this tangible resource. Because Justine and I were in the educating consulting business. And not only do people tend to want you to come and present, they also want you to give them a resource that they can actually go and use. They don't want you to tell them about what other people have done. So the very first thing you have to figure out is your why, because your why drives how you approach what you write. If you haven't figured out what your why is, it can be tricky. And then when it comes down to writing, you could be all over the place. And your why can live in two different buckets. You could say, hey, I want some income on the side. I don't necessarily want to leave the classroom or leave my admin job. So it's okay to have multiple whys.
Let me add one really quick thing, Shantae. I forgot to say, if y'all find you have any questions throughout this, please feel free to either message if it's applicable question to everybody in the chat, or you can directly message myself as I will moderate that. We will open up the final 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes together if you all want or need, for just open Q&A at the end. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I also wanted to pinpoint too, if you haven't done any deeper work with also one of my previous mentors, they showed me this really cool, like the three different Venn diagrams that overlap. Well, I'm not even saying it right, but it's the three circles, not just the two. But he basically said, you know, what is your passion, your purpose, and then what can bring you prosperity or basically extra income, where those three meet when you're brainstorming. So you put all your passions in a circle, what you believe your purpose is in life, and then also what is making you prosperous, what is actually going to make you money. That somewhere where those meet in the middle, that's probably going to be your sweet spot. So I wanted to put that out there too, to also continue to pepper in some ideas as you all think about if you want to move forward with writing your own book of the future.
So with that being said, I always tell people, because when it comes to publishing, you can self-publish. You can be published by a small publishing house. You can, get an agent. You can solicit other publications, or when they have open submission, you can submit. With all that being said, if you do not self-publish and you want someone else to do some of the work, you have to have an idea of what's in the market and what people are looking for. And even though diversity, equity, inclusion in some camps can be seen as dirty words, people still care about that. And there are people that track this information to help us. So this graphic here, the diversity in children's books, this graphic was put together to show what the diversity, and this is racial diversity. And so one of the things that I found very striking about this as a Black woman is the fact that when it comes to white children and children's books, you're at 50% of children's books have white children in them. And then the next is animals, and every other racial group is after animals. So there's a lot of people that want to write a lot of books with animals in it, which is great. But sometimes every book doesn't need to be told through the lens of animals on a farm, right? So it's also important to be mindful of which groups of people racially don't have books for themselves. And the tagline for Brave Brother Books is diverse books for all readers, because yes, representation matters, but it doesn't just matter for you. It matters for other people that don't look like you and don't have your lived experiences. So when I think about representation, I want representation so everyone can learn about each other. So that's what's really, really important for me. So I have a friend. She's part of the Mohawk Nation. And so when she was sharing that information with me, I felt compelled to learn more about her tribe and her culture and her background. And when I went to go look for her books, there's books out there. So I'm not saying there's not books about indigenous peoples and different tribes, but I really had to do some work to go look and learn more things about this friendship I had developed with my friend. And this graphic is more recent for 2020. And this also gets into disability. Only 3% of books were found in 2020 to have kids with different abilities, whether that is in a wheelchair, mental disability. When I was an English teacher, I had this homeroom class that they were just mean to each other. There's no way to not to say it. And I said, I need to find a book. And they were just mean to kids with different abilities. So we read this book called Stuck in Neutral. And this book is from the viewpoint of a kid that's nonverbal, and how he goes to the day and what it's like to have kids kind of treat you a certain way and you can't say anything back. After that book, and I wasn't even preaching about it. I'm like, we're gonna read this book during homeroom. Homeroom was 45 minutes at a particular school. And at the end of the book, the kids were like, does this author have anything else? And so we actually read the second book, and it's from the viewpoint of the sibling to that child and how he was operating in life, trying to have his own life and then be the brother to someone that's not verbal. And I mention all that because, those students in my homeroom class didn't even see that different perspective until they were able to read that book. And so it's really important to think about, if I'm going to put something out into the world, What is the benefit to it? Now, your benefit can be putting money back in your pocket. So I'm not trying to say that you have to have this big altruistic goal. So I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying these are things that if you're trying to get a publisher to publish your manuscript, these are the questions that publisher houses they ask themselves. And then this last graphic is from Lee and Low Books, which prides themselves in making sure they have diverse books out there. They do this survey every year, the Diversity in Publishing Survey, and this is from 2019. And they break it down by race, gender, orientation, and disability. And they have different kind of buckets. And then a lot of publishing houses, they want to participate in the survey because they want to see how they're stacking up. So it's really important to think about when I'm making a book, am I just adding to the pile of stuff that's already out there, or am I bringing something unique? And the books that kids tend to gravitate towards are there things that have like an interest that they have, like maybe it's sports, maybe it's a certain topic, or that's something that's new new on the scene. Justine, it looked like you wanted to say something. Okay.
No, I think it's so important just to kind of marinate on the data that we have. I think that, again, to your point, I think it's an important thing to consider what books meant to you growing up, and perhaps even if they didn't have a major role. And if you all have seen me and Shantae's podcast or anything like that, we are both obsessed with books. We were both privileged enough to be introduced to books and reading at a very young age by our parents. And it's an incredible gift. And I will also say that is not a lot of kids' stories, including a lot of teachers I work with. There are many teachers, even in like staff surveys, who are like, yeah, no, I don't read regularly, or I don't like to read regularly. And we have to start asking ourselves, well, why is that? And then also, what were the books that really sparked your interest as a kid? And what were the things about those particular books that sparked your interest? And I think that that's just important to consider when you are looking at not only what's needed in the market, but how does that then intersect with your unique why of why you want to become an author.
So keeping that in mind, I provided you guys, because you guys will get a copy of this slide deck. I gave you guys 3 articles that you can read to learn more about the Diversity in Publishing Survey, this diversity in children's books, and it gives you some extra information. So selecting your idea. I am a person who writes a lot. I tend to write something every single day, whether it gets published or not, because I do write a lot of articles as well. And with that, I have a list of just ideas. So I have a Google Doc where I just throw ideas on. I could wake up in the morning and be like, that's the idea. And that might not even be an idea I read about anytime until like years from now, but you want to have a place where you just throw your ideas down. And then when you're like, okay, now I'm going to write, then you start looking at, okay, which idea can I really flesh out into something? And then you want to think about, is it original? So I'm going to give you guys a real life situation. So Bray Brothers Books, we just published a play called Misty Mort, Afterlife Attorney. This play has been produced in New York. In 2019, a group of middle school students actually performed the play right before the pandemic and everything happened. And so the author, he has been writing plays for different middle schools. And he said, you know what, I want it in like a nice book. And I also want to be able to license it, so I'm not just sending them the Word doc. And I'm like, and I read the play and it was freaking hilarious. Like, it's good to read if you're just reading it just for pleasure, and it's good if you're going to perform it. But in the play, this afterlife attorney, she has to defend the Grim Reaper because he gets in all types of trouble with vampires, werewolves, and not. One of the characters in the play is Frank Stein. And you probably figured out that's Frankenstein, right? So now we're getting into, is this an original idea? So we had to do a lot of research about what could we use of Frankenstein in this play without getting our hands slapped with copyright. Because a lot of times people want to re-envision ideas or re-envision characters, but you can't do that because it's not in the public domain. So Frankenstein, written by Mary Shelley, that's in the public domain. The version that's in her book If you have ever read Frankenstein, you know that the monster has translucent skin. He has black hair. He's not green. He doesn't have two bolts on the side of his neck. He's not saying words and doing all this. So we had to go back and change it. Even the fact that Frankenstein is patched together. So when the playwright, who's also an illustrator, drew a sketch of Frankenstein, he made sure he was patched. So we made it very, very clear that this is Frankenstein that we're using from this version. And the reason I say that is when you have an idea, you want to write about it, the first thing you need to do is Google your idea to see if anybody's even written a book on that topic or on those topics. And then if they have, you need to read as many books as you can. So another book we published called Dear Curly Hair, this particular book is celebrating Black hair. This girl doesn't like her curly hair. She wished her hair was straight. And she goes through this whole thing. Well, I had the author read tons of books about Black hair. What are Black children books saying? Because you had Hair Love that came out that was really, really popular. So we had to make sure this book wasn't that book and wasn't any other book, that this book had a unique story. The other thing you'll find out is my book needed? Is there too much of this book? Is my book different enough? And do I have a message that adds to this collection? So it's not just picking your idea. You want to make sure your idea is needed in the market, and you don't find yourself in a copyright, plagiarism, whatever type of situation. So it's not as easy as writing something, because you can do fan fiction. I'm in a couple of blurred groups online, that's Black nerds, and people do fan fiction in there. They talk about, you can do that. Fan fiction, you can do that as long as you're not publishing and selling. The moment you go to sell, then you have to make sure you're crossing out your T's and dotting out your I's. So I say that about selecting your idea is, what is your intent for that idea? Who is your audience for that idea? Has that idea been done? And you also need to read about it. So Dear Curly Hair is actually a book that we have a licensing agreement with Seesaw. So Seesaw is a learning platform. So that book is in there. And so that book made sense. So the author from that book wanted to be able to license that. So if I want to have a book in the library, I have to think about, am I writing my book, or do I have an idea in a way that librarians want to pick my book and put the book into the library?
The other thing I wanted to add really quick, just like an AI, artificial intelligence disclaimer, because this is coming up a lot, whether it's in our schools or just in creative ventures. So whether it's musicians, artists, etc. I think one of the questions that definitely comes up for people is like, oh, there's two different things I've seen, at least on social media, where people say, oh, well, it's so easy to just write a book using AI. So there's that thought process, which is already can be very problematic. And I'll get back to that in just a minute. And then there's the other thought of, oh, well, I don't need to be an author. Why do we need more authors if AI can do all of this? So first of all, AI does not have a heart and soul, nor do they have your unique story and your unique lived experiences. And with the continued, just going back to Shantae's point specifically about diverse representation, I believe it's within the next 2 years. I want to say by 2025 or 2026 recently. Actually, even in the United States, first of all, white is not the global majority right now, as far as if we're looking at just race, but also in the United States, that is going to shift. So you're going to have multiracial, multi-ethnic, that will become the majority populace in the United States, as far as even representation within the next few years. So that, as far as people and humans needing to see story and learning from story and learning from the human experience, I think more than ever, we need authentic authors telling their stories. The other piece of that with AI is, please keep in mind that anything or anybody out there who is scamming or saying, oh yeah, write your book with AI or whatever, that is actually public domain and copywritten to those different platforms. So you can't actually cut the corners. It's like, right, all the different sayings and old adages, there's levels to this, but there's truly, you can't just skip those steps and not expect to have some type of ramification for it, I suppose, is, I don't know. I'll get off of that. But Shantae, I just wanted to put that out there too, because I'm seeing a lot of people more and more kind of almost say, well, what do you need me to write for? Or scamming and feeling like, oh, I've created this. No, you haven't. And you actually can't copyright it either. Would you add anything else just about that specific component?
I would say we've already had people submit manuscripts that are clearly been written by AI. And I'm an English teacher and I talk to people all the time. They're like, well, how do you know? And I tell people AI writes things, well, the stuff I've seen in the format of a elementary teacher teaching someone. So it's like, here's my topic, here's some details, here's a concluding statement. It's very robotic and it's not natural. And I also understand the whole thing of about embracing technology, right? So if I go to ChatGPT and I put something in there, I'm like, okay, I'm trying to rephrase this sentence. I understand that to a certain extent, but if you're using it to write your whole thing, it's easy to tell. I've always been able to catch it every single time because it's just not natural speech. And then to your point, Justin, about the human experience, one of our books, my family trip to the Smoky Mountains, that particular book, it's just about a Black family going to the Smoky Mountains. And a lot of people like that book because they're like, I do a lot of stuff about traveling in my classroom, but I don't have books with diverse people. So it doesn't have to be like a civil rights protest book. It just could be someone of a different background, just living their everyday lives. And so I think that's the other thing that people need to know. So when it comes to developing your idea and making a plan, once you nail down your idea, you got to do your research and also this is not a linear process. So you're going to do your research to nail down your idea. As you're working on your idea, you're like, ooh, maybe I should look that up. Is this the exact way this happens? You need to have time to develop what you're writing. You need to have a process, whether that process is every single Friday, I'm going to write for 1 hour. And because I write every single day, I have pretty high writing stamina. So like, I'll sit down and I will say, I'm writing. And now sometimes I'll write 2 sentences, but at that time that I said that I was going to write, even if that means I'm sitting at my computer and I have only written 2 sentences, I have started creating that habit. And so I'm in the habit of writing every single day, which is why I write every single day. I'm not saying you need to write every single day, but you have to build a habit because once you build that habit, you will get to completion. And I know we're going to get close to, I want to make sure we have time for questions and answers. So I'm going to get to this most important part is the actual process. So once you have your complete manuscript, which we will take you guys through many of the steps about how to develop character. So your characters need to develop, they need to change. There should be a change in your character. When people send manuscripts in or send me short stories and the character is the same, it's like, what was the point of your story? It was just a day in your life. If I'm going to read a story, I want the character to change, to have moved me. Your plot has to have a beginning, middle, and end, and then you need to have subplots to get to the end. And you have to have a conflict. I can't tell you how many manuscripts I've seen where it's a children's book and there's no like, what did we learn? What was the conflict? Or what was the purpose of your book? You just said a whole bunch of stuff. If I'm writing a professional book, what is the tangible thing you gave educators that they can take your book and go do? There's all these good feel-good books, which we need those. So if that's what you're going to write, that's cool. But if I'm going to write a guide about my expertise, I need to be able to put your book down and actually go do the thing that you told me about. It can't just be about your experience, which there's a time and place for that. But that's the purpose. So the reason we wanted to take you guys through the rest of the process is because this is the part that people don't understand. They think it's just about the manuscript. The program that we're going to launch in August is going to get you the completed manuscript, but we thought it was super important that you knew the rest of this process. So if you go through our program and you get your completed manuscript and you don't want to stay with us to get to the publishing part, you can go do you and you know this information. The next thing is the editing and revision, and that's multiple times. So right now I have 2 authors that are at this stage. So right now, both of these authors, they have been edited twice and had to revise twice. And that was just in-house editing. Then there was external editing. So like one of the stories that we're producing right now has a Christian lens. So we are brought in a Christian-based author, editor to kind of look at that to make sure that stuff is correct. Another book we were working on, we had it translated into Spanish, but the characters are Black. And so we brought in an Afro-Latino expert to look at the translation of the Spanish to make sure that it was said right. So I recently saw Across the Spider-Verse, and I was following different Puerto Rican people online talking about how they really appreciated the nuance in the Spanish that was used by the mom and the different characters, that it made it really feel like she was Puerto Rican and not just a generic Latino. So when it comes to editing, based on what your topic is, you're going to have your in-house editing. Then they're going to bring in an expert editing. So when we did Misty Mort, we brought in a theater expert who knew theater drama plays, as if you're reading it in the classroom, and also if you're performing it, to make sure that the scenes made sense for scene changes and blocking. So that process goes multiple times. And that's when people feel like, I'm never going to get to the end. I got to revise again. I got to revise again. But this is the most important part. And the next part is bringing your story to life. If there's illustrator, or if there's photographs. Some people want to provide their own photographs, and then they find out that your lighting wasn't right. You weren't zoomed in enough. Your pixels weren't enough. So when it's reprinted, it's kind of blurry. So there's that whole process. And then with illustrators, typically companies will get a few illustrators. They'll send up a mock-up of the main character, the protagonist, let the author see it, and then they can kind of pick. And then some authors are like, I don't want to know nothing about the illustration, just bring my story to life. I suggest you have some input on it because you might have comments later. Then after that, you title your book and you do your book cover summary. And you're probably wondering, like, Shantae, you saying we're going to wait all the way down here to make the title? The reason I say that, based on the illustrations, based on what your final manuscript looks like after the editing, you might want to change the title. So I always tell people, don't be tied to your title. Dear Curly Hair, full title originally was Dear Curly Hair, I Love You. The whole punchline of the book is that the girl falls in love with her hair. And all the beta readers were like, why did you tell us the moral of the story in the title? So we chopped off the end of the title, and that didn't happen until after like the book was really put together. Don't be so tied to that. Then after you do your book cover summary, that's where you can get your ISBN, your LCCN. And why you do this last is there's only one company in the United States that issues IBSNs, and that is Broker. A lot of times you'll see online, buy this ISBN, or this ISBN is free. Well, if you do that, whoever brought it from Broker, because that's where they brought it from, they now own your book. So it's super important to understand that. But when you apply to the ISBN, you have to put in your book cover summary. So that's information they need in their databases. So when librarians go in to search for books, they may be sitting there, because I was a librarian. And when we would go into the system, we would say, I want books about kids in wheelchairs. So you want to make sure your book cover summary has those keywords. So when the librarian goes in the search for your book, that comes up and hits. And then you have to have your ISBN before you apply to get your Library of Congress control number. And when you apply for that, you also have to put in your book cover summary. So that's why it's in this order. And then after you have that, you typically do your book spread design. And anybody that writes a book, the next thing that happens is your copy, which is your text. It gets put on a spread. So you'll see what's on each page, and then how the pages go back and forth. And then the illustrators typically do spreads across. And then after that is done, it goes to a book designer. Your book designer then decides what the copy looks like. So you may use Times Roman font. They will decide, oh no, we're gonna make the font this way. The first letter on every page is gonna be extra big. The title is going to be like this. The subtitle is going to be like that. What color it's going to be, where it goes on the page. Does it have highlights behind it? Does it change color based on the clothing of the characters or where it's formatted? And then you get the physical proof copy. And that's where you get like the printed copy of your book. There's typically revisions after that, because you can see things such as, like we had a book where the name was on the spine, but we found the book wasn't thick enough. So we had to send it back and take the name off the spine and change it and shrink it down. So when you get the physical copy, that's when you'll see like, ooh, this illustration when the book binding came in, I didn't like how that folded in. Or if I'm doing a book where I have tables for teachers, I don't like how this table looked. It actually broke this up. I need to shrink my table and reorganize it. But then you apply for your copyright, which you guys are going to get a free copywriting guide. please, please, please do not pay anybody to copyright your stuff. First of all, the Library of Congress actually answers the phone. So if you're in the system, right, applying for your copyright, you can literally call them up and they actually answer if it's within their hours. And you can email them and they reply to you back within like 48 hours. And
It's
I
true.
know a lot of times when you email the government, you're like, they're never going to email me back. The Library
No,
of
they
Congress,
do. They do.
they really do. I mean, what we have done for you is tell you all the stuff that you will need to have before you apply for copyright. So you're not in the system doing that and like, oh man, because people are literally charging $300, $400 for copyright. And depending on your book, I mean, it's under $100 to copyright your stuff. So there's no reason for you to go pay a company to copyright your stuff if you're in a copyright. And then after all that happens, you publish your book. So I know that was a lot of information for our program is really designed to get your completed manuscript, to get you at the stage of whether you want to submit it to a company, get an agent, self-publish, because some people are like, I want to get my own LLC and self-publish under that. But we want to make sure when you get to the end of our program that you have something solid that you can go run with. And Justine, do we have any questions in the chat?
I don't think we have any questions in the chat. Momentarily, we will ask if anybody wants to come off mute and ask questions too. But when you look at this list, one of the things I just want to reiterate, having lived this process a few times, and especially just to point out details, especially if you're like, well, character development, I want to write a book about how teachers need to be teaching math. Please understand that in our program, in the development of manuscript, we will have, so for example, if the module is all about developing characters, we will also have the another component of that where it might be about developing vignettes or surveys or other tools that align with the concept of your adult facing nonfiction book, which has kind of been a lot more of my world as an author. So for me, this children's book journey is new. And though they might have a little bit different steps, our program, Write Your Book, is all about for next school year, basically from August to May, you are going to be with a group of other like-minded people where you will have milestones, and we want you to come out already done with your manuscript, a completed manuscript, because those first two bullets, those bullet points, that editing and actually just getting started and having others who will hold you accountable, like, oh crap, I'm supposed to be to this point for our January call, and we're going to have feedback circles. That is how Shantae and I want the program to be, very much learning together. And we are going to start with just 10 spots. So after we open for Q&A, we're going to be following up not only with the replay link of this, but with I think it's over 20 pages from Dr. Barnes of her copywriting guide that she's giving you all for free. But then also, if you already know, like, hey, put my name on that list, because as soon as you open up the program enrollment, I want to be part of it. I believe we are only taking 10 people for our actual incubator program, where you will get not only access to the learning modules, but we will be meeting live like this once a month with all the authors in the program, the aspiring authors. Did I miss anything logistically, Shantae, about... I think part of our goal too is that we know for so many of our colleagues that are still in school-based roles, these past few years have been incredibly difficult. And they've been incredibly difficult for us in different ways too, as consultants in education. But the biggest thing is also, hopefully it's also a space where you find some joy in your own personal hobbies, in your own personal growth, to be like, okay, this is my writing time. I get to look forward to my writing time every month, but then you're also producing your manuscript, hopefully for your future book. The other thing I would offer that I will speak candidly about in our program is I have been self-published. I have been featured in also some press releases and stuff with outside publishers, but then I am also currently in process with a couple authors in the ASCD proposal process. So I can definitely offer insight about how different those different publishing processes are. Of if you want to go the route of self-publishing, there's pros and cons. If you want to go the route of working with a bigger publishing where you submit proposals like ASCD or Solution Tree. And then of course, Dr. Barnes, which is a very much more hands-on, smaller publishing house, but you're also getting a lot of value. So, okay.
Yeah, and so I got this, the slide for how you guys can connect with us outside of this program if you want to see more about us. And then I think now we're opening it up for Q&A, so you can follow us on IG, YouTube, all those different places. Check out our website. But yeah, so any questions as we bring this to a close? I feel like there was so much information.
It is. You know, we're all educators. We'll exercise wait time. As y'all are thinking through as well, if you have questions or not. Yeah, no problem. Okay, awesome. Cool. The other thing to keep in mind is that it is definitely more, in my opinion, it's more fun to be on the journey of developing a manuscript when you have other people like alongside you, because otherwise it's very easy to keep pushing it off and not get to it.
Yeah, I think the most important part of this program is the accountability piece, because I have accountability partners. I just finished my dissertation and graduated with that. My intended graduation date was like 2026, 2025. And the people in my cohort was like, why? I'm like, well, I'm gonna do this. They're like, nope. And I had two women. They're like, we are graduating in spring of 2023 and you're going to be there. And so I would get these text messages. I'm like, oh my God, what? But getting those reminders, I'm like, no, I need to sit down and write this. They are right. And so that led me May to graduate. And that's what's more important to me about this is to feel like you're not alone, because sometimes we quit things because we're like, I can't do this. I'm alone. I'm having this issue. I'm having this issue by myself. And then you realize, no, other people are having those same struggles. Yeah, I think that's what I want to add. Like that accountability piece is probably the most important piece of our program, and to be able to get feedback, because one of the reasons I was really excited to do this program was Justine. I get asked a lot about how can I write a book? And on my end, I do a lot of like getting the books published. And so people are like, well, can you do something where you show us how to get the manuscript to submit to different places? And so when Justine and I were talking about this, I'm like, yeah, I've been asked so many times, yeah, let's do this. So yeah.
And then we have EJ, if you want to come off mute, I see that you have a hand raised.
Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for sharing all of this information. I know Dr. Barnes, so I just have to say, hey, girl, hey.
Hi.
My question, I guess, my question is, okay, so for example, with my book, I originally wanted it to be out by my birthday, which I just had, June the 4th. And obviously it is not, because
happy birthday.
Thank you. But so many things like happened, of course. I think you talked about like just this past few years, like just being challenging. I'm not an educator, but I am a mental health provider. And I work in a crisis, like kind of oriented, like program. And so it's just been a lot. So I'm like, it's June. Realistically, like, do you guys think using your program, I could still get my book out this year? Would that be realistic?
Well,
or at least
I wouldn't say 2023. I would say 2024 would be more realistic, because our program will run from August of 2023 through May of 2024. But that's a realistic time. So like when people write books with big publishing houses, it can take anywhere from 1 to 3 years to go through that whole complete process. And I always tell people that is someone saying to you, oh, I can publish your book in a few months, that will raise red flags to me because they're not taking the time with your editing, your revision, working with your illustrator, working with the book designers. When you come to a book, you write the story, but there's so many other hands that really needs to be on your manuscript, and all of those hands, they really need to have their time. But within a year from now, I would say that is possible.
Okay, I came onto the Zoom late. I was in another meeting, so I may have missed when you guys set the time frame. But if I understand you correctly, using your program, basically following the steps that you guys are going to lay out, you would be completing the book through using the program. Am I understanding that correctly?
Right. That's the
Okay.
whole purpose of
super
to
exciting.
have a group, get
Yep.
you writing, get you moving along, so you can get complete. So when the school year ends in May, you're like, look at me, I got a
Okay.
completed manuscript here.
Okay,
The
I like
other-
it.
The other thought behind that, Ms. Dickens, is that we wanted to provide time and space in between. So we put ourselves back in that seat of, if you're a very busy professional, what is realistic? And it's probably not realistic if, say, our first module releases the first Sunday of every month, and then we have our group coaching call a couple weeks later. We still all need that time and space in between to take action with, like, if module 2 is all about character development and you're coming up with your character ideas, you're going to come back and present them to the group coaching, right? And get feedback. That we actually need those couple weeks in between, which is why then it coincides with, there are those monthly milestones, so that essentially by the end of the next school year, you will have that completed manuscript, so you can decide, well, do I want to publish with Brave Brothers and send them a proposal? Do I want to self-publish? Because I will also say too, that editing process is it takes time. It takes a lot of time to get your book. You think starting out, at least this is me at times, you think starting out, this is so good. And then, it morphs into something that it almost becomes unrecognizable in some facets by the time you're actually done. But that is the tough part of it, is, to Shantae's point, not holding anything too precious, but going, what is the best way to tell this story that it will connect with my target audience as well.
I understand. Thank you.
You are also welcome. Other questions?
And if your questions aren't coming to you now, feel free to contact us and we can follow up with you that way. So no worries.
Yep. What are you thinking over there, Dr. Landrum? Your backyard view looks beautiful. You get to be outside. I'm putting you on the spot since I know you.
It is wonderful to be sitting outside and enjoying nature. Yeah, I've been thinking what my topic would be, what's my why. So I've been stuck on that now for a while as I've been listening.
Okay. She has a deep roots in library background too, Shantae.
Oh, yeah.
Sure do. Library media specialist. That's right.
Yay. Well, Justine, I think we can bring it to a close, and then if people have questions or comments or anything else they want to share with us, I think they can just reach out to us, and then we'll be reaching out soon to give information about when the registration for the program opens.
Do you want, should we drop the email, your Connect email in the chat? Is that the best email, or?
Yes. Connect at bravebrothersbooks.com.
So if you find that you have very specific questions, feel free to go there, but we will be sending our entire registrant list We know many people with your busy schedules could not join live, but we thank you to those of you who could pop on, spend some next couple weeks digesting this. In the next week, our team will send you the replay, the slide deck, as well as the copyright guide. So you're going to have some things to really marinate on. To Dr. Landrum's point, please take your time, consider, and then we will also send the details for actually signing up. We will have the cart open for, I think, a couple weeks and then get started in August. So you've got some weeks to kind of think about it and digest or go back and watch this. And we just thank you all for showing up for yourselves.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it.
Take care. See you all soon.